If you listen carefully, you'll be able to hear the delicate sound of thunder during today's Undermine. We'll get to that. But first things second, welcome back to Undermine. This is the second part of our fourth season. As you'll remember, Undermine Season 4 was all about Phish in 1997. We highlighted the best shows of that landmark year in Phish history until we dove deep and featured every single show in the band's incredible Fall 97 tour. Then the season ended. But we recently just came back to see how 1997 really ended by looking at the 4 shows of that amazing New Year's run. So what's left for us to analyze in 1997? Nothing. So why is our season not over? Why are we diving into 4 shows from early 1998? Hopefully my co-hosts know the answer to that. I'm your host, Tom Marshall, and I'm joined today by both my wingmen, RJB and Benji Ison. Say hello, guys.
Hello, guys.
Hello, guys and gals.
Wait, so you're not going to explain it? I see what's happening here. All right, I'll explain it. In some ways, you could say that our entire sprawling season has led up to this moment because it's the moment some of you have been asking for, and we are going island hopping over the next 4 nights because, yes, we're on island tour. And even though we actually blew past the island tour's 25th anniversary by more than a month now, it's fine because we're on island time. The tour itself, which took place between April 2nd and April 5th, 1998, was always a phenomenon suspended in time or on borrowed time or something like that. Just a month prior, it wasn't even going to happen. Coming off a phenomenal 1997, as we documented in Undermine Season 4 last year, the band was in play mode. They performed 4 of their best consecutive shows during the New Year's run, including the first time playing MSG for 3 nights and their second New Year's Eve in the building to close out that banner year. So going into 1998, the band had studio time planned, but you know, Phish is a live band. Playing live is their oxygen, and it's where the community lives too. So in a way, it's the scene's oxygen as well, reminding us all to breathe. And me too. Phish scheduled the island tour as a quick strike, making fast time by announcing 4 shows, 2 in Long Island and 2 in Rhode Island, just 2 weeks before they were going to take place. And the shows sold out instantly, of course, and everyone started packing for the islands. RJ, any guess on who named it Island Tour?
No.
It's our good friend, Brad Sands.
Yes.
Anyway, buckle up. It's a road trip. Benji, where's our first stop?
Well, Tom, I suspiciously knew that you were going to ask me that. So I took out MapQuest like we would have done in 1998, and I put a pin in Uniondale, New York. Well, Hempstead, really. I don't know. It gets a little confusing. It's Hempstead, but it's in Uniondale. Well, the first stop on our 2-stop 4-night island tour is the Nassau Coliseum. It's appropriately home of the Islanders. Or it was, and it kind of is again. That's not even the confusing part. But apart from hockey, basketball, wrestling, and other sports, the building has a little bit of history with rock and roll. As Phish fans might be used to by now, when you go into an arena, if you look up at the rafters and you see a jersey that says Billy Joel, well, it's honorary. The Dead also have a banner up there to celebrate their record for the most amount of plays by one band, which is a number that I really love, 42. There are 42 proper Grateful Dead shows at the Coliseum, more with other projects as well. Led Zeppelin, Elvis Presley was in the building, Metallica, and others with names that are just as big, and they all have their own line in ink in the arena's little history log or guest book, with live recordings, historic nights, iconic photographs, and there's others that are tied to their particular Nassau nights. So the venue itself, let's see, it's a 15,000 capacity classic 70s era hockey arena, the kind we love to see Phish in. It was the final stop for Frank Zappa in 1998. His last show ever is Bruce Springsteen's legendary, it was the home of Bruce Springsteen's legendary 3-show run in December 1980 that was captured, and it was released in various forms of the years, including this box set that I love from him that you might have, and some other releases as well. And then, Tom, as you alluded to at the very top of the program, Pink Floyd, their album Delicate Sound of Thunder was recorded live in the building. And so that's why you hear the echoes of the delicate sound of thunder. And then, of course, considering that we are still talking about the two Phish shows that we're about to talk about, it does look like some of the building's magic wore off on our guys from Vermont.
Yeah, it's interesting because are they really from Vermont? Because Trey's from New Jersey. And, so no, he knows this area. He probably saw all those bands that you mentioned, possibly at Nassau Coliseum. Tom, did you see any shows at Nassau Coliseum? I mean, before this?
Not really. Trey was so much more adventurous than I was in terms of travel, like to New York City and stuff. He took me to like my first MSG show, took me to the Dead there and stuff. Anytime I was in New York City, I was with Trey and Peter Catoni. But even like that little tiny river that separates Manhattan from Brooklyn was enough for me not to go any further eastward. And so Brooklyn was far away. And then beyond Brooklyn was like the end of the world. So before Phish, I didn't really venture out there. No.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So I think we're going to actually, and it's still actually, just so everybody knows, no offense to people who live in Brooklyn, it's still hard to get Tom to go to Brooklyn. Okay, guys, we're talking about 4/2/98, but first let's talk about 97. So they wrapped up 97 at the show that we talked about at Madison Square Garden. And Trey, at some point in the shows, I guess it was in the first night at some point, he said they were just bored and didn't have anything to do and wanted to play more music. So Tom, do you think, or Benji, do you guys think, why do you think they decided to do this? It was so fast. And, I don't know if it's, I did like his example or his explanation of they were just bored and wanted to play seems like that's what it was. But do you think there was more to it?
There's to me, there's like a tiny element of the young kids at home. And like, imagine like you're Phish and you're playing to screaming fans and your band is on and you know that they're on. And then you go home and you have this whole other world. As Carlos Santana told Trey, you got to go home and empty the garbage and, come down from your throne because on the road, you're the king. But I think it was part of that. Like, he wanted to get back to that. I mean, right then I was a dad of two kids ages 1 and 4. And I was like, I realized that, and I was a programmer for the cable television industry, like A&E, Lifetime, and Comedy Central were my clients. And I was starting to see that Phish was more fun than computers. And so I created my own band, Amphibian, and I had a young Scott Metzger as my guitarist, and it was an incredible time. But back to Phish, I was on the bus whenever I could jump on board, and I actually rode with them from Long Island to Providence on this very tour, for example.
Well, first of all, RJ, I think that in my mind at the time when they did the Island tour, I took Trey's word almost as gospel when he said, this album's from our last week's concert. And I thought, well, it's cool. Like, it gives them a chance to fine tune, stuff for going into the studio. But that's not really the case. They played mostly the stuff that they had been playing for years. They debuted Birds of a Feather, Frankie Says, but it wasn't like their wingsuit at Atlantic City where they're actually road testing new materials. I think that they just wanted to play. I mean, 97, they just wanted to play, and they were so hot, and you could just see it when they were on stage. Every second, they were having as much fun as we were. And I mean, ostensibly they still are, but it was just this moment in time when they were riding a wave. And I feel like, New Year's Eve, kind of, that's when the wave, whatever that the previous year was, that's where it comes to a close. And I kind of felt like they wanted a little, a little bonus, a lagniappe, I believe it's called. But anyway, guys, we are rapidly approaching sacred ground with these shows, because the Island tour is like, I try not to use religious, terminology too much with Phish, but the Island tour really is like scripture for many Phish fans. So, this is our chance to dive in and maybe look at why, if not how. We know when, we know where. So now let's talk about what. And of course, let's start with April 2nd, because it would be weird if we started with one of the following nights. So this show kicks off with Tube. and which in my mind is exactly what I was talking about. It's the Tube was one of the signature calling cards of 97. When we think about 97, I think a lot of us think about that, think about the Dayton Tube and just Tube overall. It's a spiritual companion to 97. So I think starting it off like that really had that statement. Then My Mind's Got a Mind of Its Own, The Sloth, and I See You. I think these all would have hit a certain way in 1998. In fact, I know it because we were all in the building. They weren't standards at the time, and all three would have stoked some excitement. But they're standard. But they're songs. They're not jams. So I think the first thing that we can really talk about with any meat is probably that stash.
Yeah, I mean, I neglected to mention that I was at these shows, and I think Tom, you said you were, and Benji, you were also. Yep. It was so great. I was like in a similar place to Fish with very important differences in that I was a freshman in college, but we didn't have anything better to do either. So we just like got into a couple of cars and just left. And I don't remember how we even got tickets or, like we just left and we were there and we were on Long Island and we got to the venue and my friend Chris had a DAT deck and he was taping. And I think his tape circulated, but if you ever had a tape of this show where when they started Tube, it was like way, way too high and peaked right at the beginning and then turned back down. That was from my friend Chris. But because he had no idea what he was doing. He just bought a DAT deck and was like, this is going to be great. But yeah, this stash is like when we all realized like, this is why we're here. They just picked up the improvisational thread from the end of 97 and it gets like straight into this tension and then it gets ambient and it's just a really fun musical adventure. I think first set stashes, even now, like it's just a sign of, being ready to push it out there and see what happens. And it just kind of melts into horn, which is really cool. I'm sure for you guys and many listeners, like this is I know every note of this run, you just like, it's like burned into my memory, but this stash is really the highlight. Is there anything else to talk about in this set?
It does melt into horn, and I love that because I love horn as a song, and my love for it has not waned at all over the years. And as for a stash, well, I agree with you 100%, RJ. Stash is one of the three invincibles. That it has this great, reliable, and yet unique jam seemingly every time, so it never really fails. Wolfman's Brother and Bathtub Gin are the other two, by the way. And then
I've never heard that, but I agree.
Yeah, well, I just made it up.
Okay, great.
but yeah, three invincibles, because every single time any of them appear, if you see stash on a set list, there's never really a bad stash, and it's always like it's always the unsung, there's always an unsung jam in that, or in Wolfman's Brother, Bathtub Gin. Sometimes they're heralded, but a lot of times they're just in the first set and are overshadowed by some 20-minute Leviathan in the second. But they're always reliably improvisational in nature, and they always work, So anyway,
I don't have any rules like that, except my rule is if any set opens with punch, then it's going to be a great set. If it's the first set, then it's going to be a great show. If it's the second set like this night, then it's going to be a great, second set encore.
May your rule always prove true. and may I remember it the next time they open with punch. But there was this opening night excitement at Nassau Coliseum that night. I remember being in that parking lot, and I just remember, look, often opening nights have, a certain amount of anticipation and then release built into them because, everyone's looking forward to the night for so long. They're counting down the days, until tour starts. They're planning with their friends. And we have, a few months to sit and daydream at work or in college at the time, about what it's going to be like and whatever. And there was an abundant amount of anticipation and release inside the Nassau Coliseum, but it was a little bit different because there was this added excitement of, holy shit, like we're here. Fish announces these 4 shows and it's like, holy shit, we made it. Like it was like, what, like 2 weeks time between when they announced, in my mind, it was like a day, in my mind, it was like they announced it and suddenly I'm in my friend's car driving up, to Long Island. I think that there's about 2 weeks, but we got tickets and suddenly there I was in the parking lot. I bumped into you, Tom, in the parking lot. I literally bumped into you in the parking lot going into the building. So, the excitement was just, building and building.
I have a lot of memories of Island Tour, and I think I had consciously made a decision. I definitely over partied for the New Year's run, 97, like to the point where I was like telling myself I'm an awful person. You know what I mean? Every single morning. And I wasn't really partying hard. And I remember consequently kind of everything about the Island Tour. And I sort of made a realization like, hey, you don't have to be completely obliterated to enjoy yourself. And so I absolutely enjoyed, and I sensed it. I remember seeing you, Benji, everything. But it gets us exactly where we need to be at this moment. All your guys' beautiful introduction, which is to say it's time for a word from our sponsors. And they're your sponsors too, if you're listening to Undermine for free. And if you're watching us on YouTube instead, you'll see that today's Undermine is also brought to you by 3 white men with microphones. Okay, we will be right back. And just like I said we would be, we are back. Let's get to set 2 of the Island Tour opener. Benji, do you like this set?
Of course I do. Well, let's start with, there's the Wolfman's Into Sneaking Sally.
Hold on. Punch, come on.
Yeah, so yeah, punch. Yeah, but yes. Well, that now goes without saying. It's
forgot
Tom's,
it already. Forgot Tom's rule already.
The only rule from Tom, it doesn't even need to begin. It's just punch.
Okay.
But okay, the Wolfman's Into Sneaking Sally. It's simply one of the best segues that Phish has perhaps ever done, certainly at the time. And there's something about it that was very much on par with the David Bowie and the Possum that was literally just several shows earlier at MSG on December 29th, 97, of course. So, and that segue, it happens in the middle of this seamless and stopless segment of music that was designed to make the entire arena dance, on the 97 theme that we were talking about. And it was very successful. And that also the selection of Sneaking Sally that night kind of felt like a callback to the previous run at MSG. So there's like this connective tissue between the segue and the callback. Listening back now, this set too, it's not my favorite set of the run, but the quality is so high that on many other runs in the years leading up to it, it could have easily been my favorite set of that run. Because it's a flawless and set. It's constant, and for years on Phish tour, this is absolutely true. That I was thinking about it the other day. For years on Phish tour, I had friends that referred to this set simply as 422, and like giving it this mythical status. Like it was a holy thing, 422. And I think those are people, the now that I think about it, the people that referred to it as 422 were all fans that became fans in 97. And so this is just sort of like their validation, I guess. But it has a holy spirit to it. RJ, do you think that it deserves that type of reputation?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think this, as I was going through all 4 of these shows, I was at 5. I wish there were 5. As I went through all 4 of these shows, there are some.
RJ has access to the secret set.
That was 4-6. Man, that was fun. I think it's first of all 4 nights are like perfect, so it's hard. Then you start to get into the like nitty gritty of it. There's a set that we'll talk about in a couple of days that I think is like severely underrated, but I think the show is rated lower than this show. But it's all like really, splitting hairs at this point because they're all so good. And you mentioned this Wolfman's Into Sneaking Sally. I mean, the debut of Birds of a Feather, which comes back a couple of days later. I think this, like with that debut, actually, if you're really getting into splitting hairs, I think like the Simple being sort of like a transition and Birds of a Feather being kind of a short debut, I think that takes this show down like just a notch from 4-3 and 4-4. But I do think that it's basically perfect. So I don't know. I guess I'm arguing both sides. But these transitions, especially the Wolfman Sneaking Sally, like you said, the debut of Frankie Says, which is weird and creepy and fun, just going straight into twists, which, this kind of centerpiece of the tour, of the night. I mean, it's just, man, listening to this is it's just so satisfying because it delivers every time. But this twist Mike is really driving it, I think, on re-listen for the 200th time. But in this whole run, they're not in a hurry at all, and it's just so fun to hear. And I think you hear that at like festivals, right? Like Clifford Ball and Great When, and Trey said was that from the stage at Clifford Ball when he said, like, we don't have anywhere to go for a few days, so we'll just keep playing. Like, I feel like this little run had that similar feel. Like they didn't have anywhere to go. They weren't in a hurry. And I think that got reflected in the music. Like this twist has so many twists and turns, but none of them are like frenetic or, it's just sort of like it's patient. And I think it's so fun to listen back to.
Yeah. The energy was palpable. And I think this is one of those nights where the band was feeding, providing as much energy to the crowd as the crowd is providing to the band. It's one of those perfect equilibrium nights and beginnings of a tour. It was incredible. I don't know who was more excited, the band or the crowd. And that's exactly the way you want it. And the music was just so good, stunningly good. But I just wanted to say, RJ, you reminded me just now, Trey, and I think it might be from the Woodstock movie, but he had a lot of like Hendrix stuff. So it might not have been Hendrix, but it was, I think it might have been Woodstock because it was like rainy and he was like saying, Hendrix says, we're just going to jam here. So if you guys want to go home, you can, or something. If you want to leave, you can. And Trey always has wanted to say that from stage. And I think that was his version of it. He thought it was the coolest thing to say, rock and roll ever.
Well, it was.
Tom, it had that when you talk about the energy between the band and the audience, and we really were all one inside that building, inside both of those buildings. And a part of that, you got the feeling that Phish wanted to play so badly that they would have paid the audience to be there. Yeah. It was like everything, it was all one. It didn't matter who was paying or who was playing. It was just this, and we all were there.
Let's say Phish now starts paying us, you know what I mean? Yeah, they could turn it around. That'd be cool.
But let's not say that we played the band and we played the music. Let's leave that to them. Okay. But Tom, speaking of that, this is where you kind of dally in both worlds. I'm curious. I as I said earlier, I ran into you on the way inside the building, and during that run-in, that little bump-in, you mentioned that there was a new song called "Birds of a Feather," and you were right. you weren't making it up.
How did I know? Yeah.
Even if you actually you made it up, but you weren't making up the fact that it existed. So let's talk about the new song for a moment. The new song being "Birds of a Feather." So, appropriately, I think it debuted during a show in which I do remember that there were a lot of people shut out outside. And I think, 97 and 99 was when that was the outside shutout thing was a real phenomenon. And that there were a lot of people in the parking lots that some of whom weren't even planning on going into the show. And that's not as prevalent now as it used to be. But I remember in Nassau, I seem to remember that there are drum circles and there are fingers in the air. And there was like a balloon for every car in the parking lot. So are those the birds of a feather flocking outside that you're talking about in the song? And, do you ever discuss that type of context with Trey?
Trey said, for every car, there's 6 people and 1 ticket or something like that. No, I didn't discuss it with him. This is one of those like set and forget lyrics where I just gave him the lyrics. And I often like him just to figure out his own context. And sometimes he'll tell me, I don't coach him. Sometimes I might say, so what's that one about for you? Like, I remember Crowd Control. We had like almost radically different interpretations of it. But the interpretations are slightly different. But for Birds, I think you can tell it's kind of like what I saw wandering around Shakedown or in a festival or something. Just good vibes, mainly with some angst thrown in. It's not an experience if they don't bring someone along, or strutting out of stride and all that, but mainly good crowd vibes.
I love the angst thrown in.
You have to throw a little in, or it's not a Phish song.
I'm a fan.
So, Tom, did you know what it would sound like? When they like performed it? For this?
No, so no, no, I knew. I think Trey had told me, like, "Are you here?" kind of thing, like or beforehand. I'm glad you're here. Or else I had witnessed them practicing it or something in the practice room. But I knew it was coming, but I didn't really know much about it, and so I was kind of surprised. I was surprised. He did a lot of work on this one without me. I was just the word boy.
Well, I want to go. Can we just go back to the twist just for a second? Because I think this twist was debuted the year before, and Tom, you've talked a lot about the creation of that song. I think you talked about going to sleep and waking up, and Trey was finishing the demo of that song, or finishing the song. But
he worked on it all night. Yep.
It kind of came. I mean, it came out a year before, but it's sort of. I mean, it was kind of perfect for the time because there's this, like. I mean, it's obviously got a nice groove to it, but it also is pretty open-ended, you know. But I feel like this version really is where it kind of takes this turn where, and then we'll hear, you know, in the future, you get the Japan twist and the one from Camden 03. And there's a lot that, you know, it's kind of gone out of the jam rotation over the past few years. But Benji, I feel like twist like really fits this era and the sound in terms of the improv, but maybe that's just because it's a pretty simple song, you know, chord structure wise. Well, so it gives them a lot of open room.
Well, you know, RJ, it's kind of my final takeaway of this night is that twist. First of all, Tom, from now on, we're going to call you Word Boy. That's your new nickname. But, you know, 25 years later, yeah, RJ, you nailed it. Absolutely. What I remember most about this night musically, I think, well, the Birds of a Feather stands out. And still, both of these Island Tour versions still stand as two of the greatest versions of the song. I think, and for years they were literally leading the jam charts with it. But what I remember most about that twist, you know, it's interesting. What I remember about it is Chris Kuroda. Chris Kuroda had a peak moment of his own, and for maybe 10 seconds, the entire building looked like a spaceship that was taking off. And it happened to be during the same 10 seconds when the music sounded like it could be a spaceship taking off. And therefore, it felt like we were on a spaceship that was taking off. And, you know, it's interesting because now you can go into just about any fish lot after just about any given fish show, and you probably find a kid that says the same thing about 10 seconds that particular night. Oh, man, we were on a spaceship and we were taking off and corroded the lights. But the thing about the 4-2 twist is that everyone who was in that building that night remembers it that way, or at least maybe amongst the company I keep. But I remember walking out and everybody was talking about it. And for years, you know, when I would bring that twist up with my friends, they'd say, and Kuroda, because it was just like, it was a specific thing he did. He never had done it previously. And the only way to describe it is we were taking off. Do you remember that, RJ?
I do. I remember the lights incredibly well. Like awesome. Fish, like somehow, I don't know if between 97 and 98, he got an addition to the light rig or something, or else maybe he was just like as fired up as the band. But for whatever reason, it was incredible. Yep.
I do remember it being slightly different from Fall 97 in some way.
It was specifically during that twist, like he just did the one, and it worked with the music and of course with the audience, you know, so it was amazing.
Man, I hope we did justice to this first night because it's because we have 3 more nights to go, but also because, man, what a great way to open a run.
Exactly. What a great night one for Island Tour. It's incredible. And will they top it? This legendary opening night. How will they top it? Come back tomorrow to find out. We'll still be in Long Island for night 2 at Nassau. Undermine is brought to you by Osiris Media. Executive producers are Tom Marshall, RJB, and Benji Eisen. Edited by Eric Limarenko, mixed and mastered by Matt Dwyer. Production assistance from Nick Sejas. Original music by Amar Sastry and art by Mark Dowd. Peace out.